I want to tell you first how I came to be interested in this. When I'm not doing UKIP and UKIP stuff, I'm into astronomy. I have been since I was a little child, and my granddad let me look through his telescoping telescope, a real telescope, trying to look at the stars and the moon, and I was fascinated by it. I was a former chairman of the Torbay Astronomical Society, and at the Astronomical Society I met Graham Booth, who was a fellow astronomer. Graham Booth, of course, was the MEP for the South West. And we would talk about climate, etc., etc. And I would like to think that I've got a small part to play in UKIP's stance on climate change, because I bent Graham's ear about it, and Graham was a great good friend of Nigel Farage, and I'm pretty sure that Graham bent the ear of Nigel about climate change. I remember the time when Graham Booth gave a talk to the EU Parliament on climate change, and he actually ran the paperwork past me first to see if I thought it was okay. And I said, fantastic. I've given talks on astronomy before, but I've never actually given a talk on this climatology stuff. It's a weird thing though when I talk to people on a one-to-one basis or in small groups. If I start telling people stuff about astronomy, you know, I can say to them the Earth is 7,927 miles in diameter, that the Sun's 750,000 miles in diameter, 93 million miles away, and the Moon weighs 6 sextillion tons, which is a 6 followed by 21 zeros. The Milky Way galaxy's got 250,000 million stars in it. People don't bat an eyelid. They think, okay, he knows his stuff, he's coming up with all these figures, why bother to contradict him? But you start talking about climate, and all of a sudden they say, well, what do you know? You're not a climatologist. Patrick Moore, amateur astronomer. He always regarded himself as an amateur astronomer. I knew Patrick Moore fairly well in my dealings with the Astronomical Society in Torbay. And I talked with Patrick Moore, and Patrick Moore didn't believe in human-caused climate change. Like me, he believed in climate change, all right, but not the man-made aspect of it. Anyway, it's climate change that I want to talk about, because I actually do believe in climate change, and I want to perhaps tell you which bit of climate change I believe in. So, first graph. It's an easy one. I'm going to start from there and call it 1850. Okay, I'm going to call it 1850. So that's 1850, that's now. As you can see, the climate's warmed since 1850. That's the graph that all the climate changers are talking about. That's the period of time that they're talking about that climate's moved up in. I'm going to turn that graph into what's called a hockey stick graph, which you probably may or may not have heard of. But the hockey stick graph is a graph that's done all the damage. And the hockey stick graph essentially looks like that. And that goes back something like 1,000 years, from there to there. It's shaped like a hockey stick. That went out to every household in Sweden, I think it was, and all the television programs, even a movie was made about it. However, the real graph looks nothing like that. I want to tell you that this graph is now being totally and utterly discredited, but nevertheless, the stuff that this graph is brought about is still with us now, and it's costing us a lot of money. The real graph that looks like this, that's equivalent to this, looks something like this. So here is now. Let me take it up a little bit higher. Okay, So what we've got here is we've got now, this is what was called the Little Ice Age, and this is the medieval warm period. And you might be able to tell, if I'm doing it right, not right, that now is about as warm as the medieval warm period. So we can't have that, so the medieval warm period's got to go. And using mathematical tricks, that was the result. That graph was the result. Further climate change. This graph is only the end bit of a much longer graph. And if I can draw that now, it goes something like this. Something like that. Okay, this period here is about 10,000 years, actually 13,000 years. This little bit at the end there, that little bit at the end there, is this bit there. That's where we are actually. It's much shorter than that, but you can see it from back there. So it's much shorter. This is the Holocene interglacial period. In this Holocene interglacial period, there have been 11 periods that are as warm, if not warmer, than now. So that's something just to keep in mind. Carbon dioxide, nothing to do with it, because they're all telling us that carbon dioxide today is higher than it's been for a very, very long time. And I want to get back to the subject of carbon dioxide in a little bit. But anyway, that's another graph. Taking us back even further in time, because that's just showing one interglacial period. So the next graph, which looks like this, okay, so it looks a bit like the teeth on a saw. This bit here is now this bit here. So that represents about 13,000 years. And this, of course, is the glaciation period. So down here, it's at the bottom of the glaciation period. There have been many glacial interglacial cycles. This is the Holocene, that one was the Permian, and so on. Again, you look at that graph, and I can't really see any difference between this interglacial and that interglacial, or that interglacial, or that interglacial, and yet they're telling us that somehow this one's different. The bizarre thing is about this, in addition, as I say, these interglacials, they last on average 10,000 years. So you get roughly 90,000 years of glacial period and 10,000 years of interglacial. So we're already about 3,000 years overdue a full-blown ice age. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow or in 100 years' time or in 1,000 years' time, but we are due a glacial period at some time, and the temperature won't be going up, it will be plummeting down.
Are you saying that it's going to get very, very cold?
It is at some stage going to get very, very cold.
Councillor full of wire.
Doesn't look like that in the council strategy.
This is a huge subject, a vast subject, and I'm trying to whistle through it in just 15 minutes. So there's an awful lot that I'm not saying that if you want to, you can go away and look at.
Yeah.
About the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that everyone's talking about. Carbon dioxide is plant food. You green the earth. People who grow tomatoes, they grow them in greenhouses where they increase the amount of carbon dioxide in the greenhouses just to make the things grow bigger and faster, etc., etc. But just to give you an idea how much carbon dioxide there is in the atmosphere, if you can imagine that the atmosphere gases are represented by a kilometre. So the whole atmosphere is represented by a kilometre. The first 780 metres of that kilometre is oxygen. Nitrogen. The next 210 metres is oxygen. The next 10 metres is water vapour. Just 38 centimetres, just about this, is carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Of that carbon dioxide, about 1 millimetre is the man-made stuff. If Britain shut down its industries totally, utterly, we got rid of everything, cars, industry, we went back to a Stone Age type of living, you're probably talking about the width of a hair off of that graph. So you're talking about tiny, tiny amounts of carbon dioxide. But I'm not saying that carbon dioxide isn't a greenhouse gas. It is. In theory, it's a greenhouse gas. But something has gone wrong with the theory. There ought to be a hot spot in the atmosphere up there, and we can't find one. No matter how much they look for it, it's not there. In theory, the greenhouse gas theory says it should be, and it isn't, which is a little bit strange.
What generates the hot spot then?
Well, just like they say, it's smooth, it acts like a little bit like a blanket. It settles up there in the troposphere, lets sunlight through, doesn't let it back out, and it warms from the top down, theoretically, but it's not working out like that. So what does cause climate change on this kind of scale? The truth is that no one knows. No one has got a clue. There are a lot of theories out there. There's one theory called the Marychurch theory, which is a little bit like sitting at traffic lights with your right turn indicator going. So your indicator's going flash, 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 and you look at the car at front, and his indicator's going, but they're slightly out of step. Every so often, though, they'll come in step. And you can even try this with 3 cars.
Yes.
And it's a little bit complicated, you have to wait a little bit longer, but eventually all the signals on the cars will be flashing in step for 2 or 3 flashes, and they go out of step again. That's what the Marychurch theory is all about, in a way, because there are things happening in astronomy that conspire to bring about these events. The obliquity of the Earth's orbit, the angle of the Earth's tilt, precession. Sometimes they all fall in step. But although we are now due a glacial period, these steps are not in place. So if we are going to get an interglacial period, it won't be because of the Marychurch cycle, as much as people try to get it work. So it's something else. But what could that something else be? I particularly got interested in climate change when a guy called James Hansen stood up about 23 years ago now in front of the American Congress and said that climate change was happening, but it was all our fault. It happens that James Hansen is a solar astronomer, an American solar astronomer. Up until that point, any astronomer anywhere would tell you that climate is caused by the sun. William Herschel thought so. Patrick Moore thought so. Lots of people thought it was caused by the sun. If it is caused by the sun, though, I have to say that it's not a direct link. It's not a question of the sun warms up, the earth warms up, the sun cools down, the earth cools down. It doesn't work like that. People have looked for the direct correlation, and there just isn't one. So it's something a lot more subtle than that backs along several steps. The best theory that I've heard so far is by a Danish astronomer called Spencermark. He proposes that the magnetic fields on the sun, which can diminish greatly in times of solar minimum. Sometimes you get a grand minimum or a grand maximum. It just happens that several of these minima on the sun have coincided with cool periods during the Holocene. It probably isn't coincidental but no one really knows what the exact mechanism is. But Svensmark's theory is that it is to do with the sun's magnetic field. The magnetic bubble which extends around the Earth protects us from cosmic rays from the background stars and from the sun. So the idea is that when you've got a diminished magnetic field, these cosmic rays, they come into the atmosphere, little particles, and they form nuclei for water droplets to form around. In other words, they increase the cloud cover on Earth. If you've got increased cloud cover, the white clouds bounce the sunlight back into space, and so the Earth cools down. The weird thing is, right now, the sun is doing something odd. It's doing something that no living astronomer has ever seen. It looks like it's going to go into a grand minima again. Is it
Can you
going?
explain what grand minima actually is?
It's a period when you've got, in particular, the sun's magnetic field is very low, and the ultraviolet of the sun is very low, but the visible sign is the sunspots on the sun decrease. William Herschel, the guy who discovered the planet Uranus, noticed this back in 17, whatever it was, because he was an astronomer, and he wondered if there was any correlation between sunspots and the temperature on Earth. And given that there weren't any good thermometers at the time, he did what he thought was a good proxy. He looked at the price of wheat on the theory that if you've got a warm summer or a warm year, the price of wheat will come down because it's plentiful, and if you've got a bad year because it's poor weather, the price of wheat will go up. And he found that there was a correlation, as far as he could tell, between the price of wheat and the sunspot cycle. So, as I say, astronomers generally believe that the sun has got a lot to do with the temperatures on Earth. Yeah, this James Hansen, anyway, he gave this talk to the American Congress, saying it's all our fault. And there is a consensus now. There are a lot of people that have jumped on this bandwagon who are scientists who I think find it impossible to get off the bandwagon without losing face. Because the sun is doing something strange. And you may or may not know this, but there has been no further climate change on this planet for 19 years and 4 months, I think it is now. It's flatlined. In fact, there's a slight decline in temperature. There's been no further climate change at all. People have reached 18 years of age, and they're born in a time when there has been no further global warming, which is a little bit strange. People such as Hansen, or a guy called Mann, or the other half a dozen people in the world who are actually pushing this agenda, they didn't see this one coming. They've no idea why it's there. It's an embarrassment to them. It's an embarrassment to the whole man-made climate change thing. So, okay, finish off quickly. There's only been one time in the past where the carbon dioxide content of this atmosphere has been as low as it is now. And I mean the carbon dioxide content of this atmosphere, the atmosphere, despite what the people say about, oh, you know, we mustn't make carbon dioxide go up anymore, is incredibly low compared to the majority of the world's history. The only time that it's been this low is in the Carboniferous period. And that's because a period before that, the Devonian period, when the carbon dioxide was high, the Earth greened. It was the greenest that the Earth's ever been. And when those trees died, and eventually formed coal and oil, etc., it locked that carbon dioxide up into the ground. The carbon dioxide levels of the Earth go up and down naturally anyway, but it's the only other time that the carbon dioxide has been as low as it is now. All the rest of the time, all through the dinosaur eras, etc., etc., and you could go back in a time machine, get out the TARDIS or whatever, and breathe this stuff, it wouldn't do you any harm at all. So raising the carbon dioxide levels isn't going to hurt you. It's going to give us a warmer planet. Places on the planet will change, but it's better, it's much better than what the alternative is. I think that just about wraps it up.